Yeah, which really brings us to Donald Trump's speech on Saturday. And I want to play a clip, but to set it up, this is such an extraordinary departure from Trump's approach to Venezuela. All right. That's probably it is our most recent example of what Trump's foreign policy is, what his temperature for regime change is. In Venezuela, he got Maduro in the middle of the night. There was this upswell like, hey, okay, we're going to get Venezuela back to a democracy. Who's the opposition leader? Trump waters it down. He says, you know what? I don't reckon she's got the support. Being code for the military is not going to support her. But that is such a different tone to the one he struck on Saturday when he talked about the Iran strikes.
Upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom, to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you. I made a promise to you, and I fulfilled that promise. The rest will be up to you, but we'll be there to help.
And what makes that so extraordinary to me is that if Trump gets that wrong and people go into the streets to protest, they go into the streets to take the country back, and the military fights back, that is thousands of bodies in the streets from Donald Trump's words. And you'd think like that would be the equivalent of Reagan's tear down this wall moments and they build a second story. Like it would be so humiliating for him. It would completely undo all the legacy in the Middle East he wants. But he must know that. He must think this is the moment. The military might not fight back. What are the chances that Iran can seize the country right now?
Well, I think there was a window that there's a time frame that President Trump actually thought that he can get a deal. They can get an agreement with the Iranians under the pressure that they were under, economically, and the military buildup that President Trump kind of placed around the country. And we have the midterm elections coming up here, and President Trump was hoping that a deal might be more of he can get a better outcome from a deal, and he gave him a really good chance. But I think President Trump knew that it was unlikely to get a deal, but he wanted to give it a shot. And I think that's why he was so ready to go in. And I guess, you follow the news and you realize what happened is what I had experienced during my time in the government. What I always say is the Iranian regime is his own worst enemy. They had chances one after another during the Biden administration to get a deal. They were given great options, yet they just pushed for more, or they just wanted to drag the talks for longer, and they failed. And that backfired, and they ended up, not getting anything. And here we are, President Trump in the office, and he's not going to fall for that game. I think President Trump he looked at a range of options. It would have been a deal. He hoped that the Iranian regime would accept would be reasonable and accept the offer that was put before them. The other option would have been go in and take out their capabilities, the military capabilities, the missile system, finish up, the nuclear program, at least delay that program for a long time, and give Iranians a chance to go in and take over the political institutions and bring about a change. And, Iran just had some strong round of protest. So if I'm sitting in the White House and I see that Iranians are ready and willing for regime change, but then they're being suppressed and they're being murdered on the streets, and I have U.S. national security interests that are being threatened by this regime, then I would count on the Iranians to go and take the country back if this regime is weakened in a way that it can't kill, it can't suppress the people as much as it has in the past. So I think President Trump just went for that. And I think the Iranians, there's a very good chance that as soon as the strikes are over, you're going to see Iranians seizing the moment in pushing for regime change. And one last thing, I hear from inside the country that the security forces of the Islamic Republic are now more focused on controlling the population, avoiding or preventing or disrupting any protest or uprisings, as opposed to going to the help of people who are being targeted by, these days, um, or focusing on reconstruction or working on defensive measures that they need to develop during these strikes. They're more focused on avoiding another round of uprisings because they know it's coming.
Yeah, and that to me speaks to the point you were making earlier about it being a paper tiger, because that's the actions of a paranoid regime, not a powerful one. That's a regime that doesn't have its affairs in order, that knows that they're hanging on by a thread, and they're more interested in self defense than actually, self defense against their own people rather than self defense against themselves. So you brought up that Iran is a paper tiger. When you were with the US Treasury, you were quite influential in designing the sanctions that went against Iran. I just want to know, one of the Donald Trump's central theses for why this action was so necessary was that he did not feel that Iran was never going to get a nuclear weapon, that they were going to stand down on it. Do you echo those thoughts? Like, was Iran ever going to get to a nuclear position, and were they ever going to abandon those plans?
You know, here's what I can offer. It's difficult to predict, but you look at the past and policies of this regime, and you can have a good guess. They spent close to at least hundreds of billions of dollars, if not 1 trillion, on the nuclear program. It's only produced less than 1% of electricity for them. It has not turned into any pharmaceutical, meaningful research and development program for them. It's nothing but the tool to blackmail the international community. It's their it's really closely tied to their revolutionary ideology. It doesn't have economic justification. It doesn't have political justification. It's really what it is. It's another revolutionary um, ambition that they have. So you look at that, um, then it's unavoidable to be worried about whether this regime would consider quickly moving towards a weaponization of the program. And by the way, this program was a nuclear weapon program, and they had um, invested time and resource in developing an understanding of how to get to a nuclear weapon. And at the same time, they're developing ballistic missile technology that really is just nothing but it doesn't have a whole lot of justification for them other than capability that they need to deliver nuclear weapons. So all the signs point to this really reasonable concern that these guys are they can in any moment make a decision to move towards a nuclear weapon. And um, and it would be very scary for not just for the international community, but for the Iranians themselves. What I kept hearing from Iranians, ordinary Iranians, is that they don't want to turn into a North Korea. Um, that with a nuclear weapon, and they're stuck, fully isolated. Um, and I think President Trump's concerns were very reasonable. That this, a nuclear program that has no justification other than a tool for blackmail the international community, and a threshold nuclear weapon program, it's very dangerous to be left in Iran with this regime.
And what's interesting to me is that thought was also available to Obama and his administration, that these people are crazy. They can't be anywhere near a nuclear weapon. They can't be anywhere near something that could possibly one day design a nuclear weapon. And yet they were rolling back sanctions. I know you were working with the Treasury official, Treasury at the time, on doing these sanctions. What were you must have been absolutely outraged that this is the stance the administration was taking.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, I was a civil servant, and my role was to implement the president's policy objectives in the best way possible. At a personal level, I designed, worked very hard on the maximum pressure campaign. I had a team of professionals who helped us design that campaign and target the regime, and trying to track and freeze the fund that they were the assets in funds that they were stealing from the Iranian people, and trying to invest that in proxies and terrorist organizations, or the corrupt actors that part of this regime, that they were stealing those resources from the Iranians. So we had a really strong pressure campaign in place, and then we had President Biden who came in, and he wanted to take a different approach. And President Biden's approach was to um, go back to the JCPOA, and one I was asked to help put together sanctions relief incentives for the negotiators at the time to offer to the Iranians in exchange for some restrictions on the nuclear program. Um, and I think folks understood at the time the nature of the regime. I'm not going to say that the Biden administration officials, or prior to that, the Obama administration officials, they were uninformed. They were very informed. They knew exactly who they were dealing with. But the approach was, you can address the nuclear issue, you can kick that can down the road, and then you can deal with other issues that they're causing, such as support to terrorism, the ballistic missile program, and the human rights violations. What was missing is the understanding of, when you're dealing with a centralized theocracy, dictatorship, you can't say, I'm going to address one behavioral issue, and then give you incentives in exchange for you agreeing to some restrictions on that issue, but then we're going to go after other activities you're involved in. And we know that wouldn't work. And as as a U.S. government official, as on a personal level, I had concerns about their approach, but my role was to implement and give them the best options, and I did so. My Iranian side, and as being an Iranian American, it was an opportunity for me to go back and look at the JCPOA sanctions relief, the time frame that Iranians had sanctions relief during the JCPOA, because that would have helped me at the time to understand what type of sanctions relief would be attractive to the Iranian government officials who were engaging in negotiations with U.S. government at the time. And what I can tell you, I was not able to find any signs, any indications that the sanctions relief that were given to the Iranian regime during the Obama administration were used or were leveraged to help the Iranian economy and the ordinary Iranians. They were basically just enriching the regime and its mafia and its corrupt actors. So that was another lesson, kind of a eye-opening experience for me. Not eye-opening, but really just understanding how another deal wouldn't really benefit the Iranian people. And I think the Iranian people themselves knew very well, coming out of the JCPOA, out of the nuclear deal, that this regime is not going to cut a deal to help make the economy better for the Iranians. It's really just a regime survival tactic that they were trying to achieve.